folks, it's Dr. Perks. This week's lesson has a lot of in-depth content, and so I wanted to give you this video voiceover just to help frame your study guide questions. I'm hoping that my explanations at the outset make the study guides easier for you to complete. So I first want to point out that each case study always presents the facts of a case, so it's that definition phase of the Potter box. But I want to point out the structure, and maybe you noticed this earlier, I'm hoping you did, but if not, um, there is always a description of the case followed by a blue line with four squares, and then underneath the blue line with four squares is where the textbook authors incorporate that strong media ethics component. So, for example, one of the case studies spends about 2 pages describing conflict in the Middle East and giving you that history, which is important, but then the media ethics component comes in again after that solid blue line and the four squares. So, I wanted to clarify that because some of our show and asks haven't focused on media, and it's important to note that media component always needs to come in. And one case like this, where it's not overtly about media at the beginning, is case 12, Korea bans US beef, candlelight vigil. And so this case study talks about peaceful protests and why they're not as favorable for news coverage. They're not as exciting. They're not as visually appealing. They're not sensational. And the theory that the textbook authors bring in there is technological determinism by Jacques Ellul. So other people have written about technological determinism, but that's the standpoint they start with. And so I just wanted to give you some explanation of that because I think that content is a little challenging. Please do give it a thorough and careful read, and hopefully my explanation makes it easier. So just a few quotes that should help you understand technological determinism. First, its opposite, we could say, or competing or alternative theory, is instrumentalism. And so this quote on 93 helps me understand. The prevailing worldview in industrial societies is instrumentalism, the idea that technology is neutral and does not condition our humanness. So technological determinism says the opposite, that technology does condition who we are, how we see ourselves, what we value, and by extension, what news coverage is considered exciting and newsworthy. Another quote that helps is, in this technological society, we have become experts on instruments, but neglect ends. So this is an enduring philosophical question of, just because we can do something, should we do that thing? So to what outcome or ends do we use technology? And again, this points back to the idea that technology shapes our identities, our interactions, and our values. And I'll just give a Twitter example. I don't feel great after scrolling through my Twitter feed. It's very polarized, at least the folks or accounts that I follow. There's a lot of really funny, kind of lighthearted stuff, but there's also a lot of negative, snarky, and indignant tone to posts. So I see news articles, I see, people's opinions, and it doesn't bring out the best in humanity. I'm just going to show you this one clip that, came to my attention through Twitter, and then I'm going to briefly analyze it for you. So this is a fox at a fox rescue organization, and he or she is going to take a phone. So do I love the little foxy sounds? Yes. Do I love the view of its shadow running? Yes. I really also like the close-up of its face at the end. But what does this Twitter clip do for me? Does it make me more knowledgeable about fox rescue or the fur trade? Does it help me understand humanity or society better? Not really, right? It's just quick, kind of bite-sized amusement. Someone in the comments noted that it seems like a really great opening to an anime show. And what that comment brings up for me is this idea that we're in a media saturated world, and we can go back to our advertising lesson to remind us of that. And it's a technology saturated world as well. And just trying to think about, again, why do I go on Twitter? Does it help me at all in my life? What does this video do for me? And I'm not saying don't be amused and don't go on Twitter, but I'm just saying technological determinism pushes us to question why we do what we do and what the outcomes are. One outcome of our affinity for content like Instagram and Twitter produce, and I know they don't produce content, they're a platform, but that kind of content, it makes it harder for us to concentrate on in depth and involved topics. So if you're struggling reading these chapters and you find yourself mindlessly scrolling on your phone, I check the weather, I check my social media accounts, I check my bank account. I don't know why. I don't need to do that stuff multiple times a day. So again, I kind of got off track there, but not really. Um, our attention spans suffer and struggle because of this bite-sized content that doesn't do anything for us. So technological determinism kind of pushes us to think more carefully and critically about the impact of technology on our way that we interact with and see the world. I'll give you just another example here of this media saturated world and what it does to our identity. This quote on 93 also makes a lot of sense to me. Our own voice and identity are replaced by a technicized worldview. So, a technicized worldview. And here's a picture of a dahlia flower, and they're one of my favorite flowers. And one of my gardening magazines recently pointed out that there's been a surge in people growing and buying these flowers. So it's not just dahlias, but it's other like large sized flowers like sunflowers. And the reason they said that these are becoming more popular is because they're very Instagram worthy. People like posing with big flowers instead of with a bunch of small flowers. So that visual quality is there for them. And if we go another step further and we connect more directly to the focus of this week's lessons on news, I want to just kind of throw it back to previous show and asks. So this was Elizabeth's show and tell topic from many weeks ago now. And so she showed us that this map of air travel, global air travel, was misleadingly, trotted out at various news organizations to show the spread of coronavirus or COVID-19. And it was just a map about global air travel, and an old one at that. So this is sensational. It encouraged people to think, oh my gosh, there is a really strong risk of coronavirus spreading. And of course, it was spreading. But, right, this idea, no country is safe from coronavirus's deadly tentacles, that's not the kind of accuracy in reporting that we need during a pandemic, right? But that visual appeal sometimes drives reporters to include it without proper context because it's a good story. It seems like a good story, even though it's inaccurate. And I think this was Jessica's example. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm just going to show you this show and tell here again.
This video, obtained by ABC News, appears to show the fury of the Turkish attack on the border town of Tel Aviv, a border town bombarded by Turkey's military. This video right here appearing to show Turkey.
Okay, so the concern here was that it was an old military exercise video. It was not at all in Syria, and so many different news organizations touted this footage as real Syria footage. And so the show and ask reminds us of the importance of accuracy in reporting, checking that your footage is what it says it is, and just making sure that you're not misleading the public about what's going on in a given country. And a lot of the examples from the case studies for this week are about accuracy in reporting, but they're also, again, about what's newsworthy. So explosions, war and conflict, terrible images of suffering. These are the things we think of commonly as newsworthy. And again, circling back to case study 12 about the candlelight vigils in South Korea, peace vigils aren't seen as newsworthy. And that's a problem. That's a problem with the accuracy of information. And it's also a problem for human relations. So, emphasizing conflict over community, emphasizing war over peace processes. So, I want you to keep those ideas in mind as we go through, or as you go through the chapters and look at the guiding questions and study guides. So, I hope this helps. And let me know if you have questions before you submit the study guides. We will have another in person class, this time at 4 o'clock on Thursday, and I'll make an announcement in Blackboard about that. Take care, everyone.